Welcome. This is a quiet historical story, told slowly. There's nothing you need to imagine, remember, or follow closely. You can simply listen or let the words drift past as you rest. The story begins in its own time, and it will continue whether you stay awake or not. The fire burns low in the grate, its light pressing against the stone hearth and the floorboards nearest the iron dogs. The wood has broken into coals, red beneath a skin of ash. Small flames appear and fade along the edges where the bark has not yet given way. The heat reaches only a few feet into the room before the cooler air takes over. Rain strikes the windows in bursts, driven sideways by wind that comes off the water. The glass is thick, set in frames of dark wood, and the sound arrives muted, a hushing that rises and falls. Between the gusts, water runs down the panes in paths that catch the firelight and lose it again. The stone walls hold back the weather. They are 2 feet thick in places, lime-washed long ago, now darkened near the ceiling beams. A long table stands in the center of the room, its surface scarred by years of use. The grain shows through where countless arms have rested, where plates and cups have been set down and lifted away. 6 chairs are pushed in around it, their backs carved with simple patterns worn smooth. A bench sits against the far wall beneath a row of wooden pegs. Coats would hang there in the earlier hours. Now the pegs are empty. The mantel above the fire holds a brass candlestick, unlit, and a small wooden box with a sliding lid. A clock ticks on a shelf to the right of the hearth, a tall case clock with a painted face, its pendulum swinging behind a narrow glass door. The ticking is steady, a double sound, louder in the pauses between the rain. The minute hand rests just past the quarter hour. In the corner farthest from the fire, a sideboard holds a row of pewter mugs, their surfaces dull in the low light. A pitcher stands beside them, heavy stoneware with a chipped spout. The wood of the sideboard is darker than the table, polished by hands reaching for the same handles, opening the same drawers. The ceiling beams run the length of the room, rough-hewn and blackened with age. Shadows gather in the spaces between them. The floorboards are wide, fitted close, uneven where the building has settled. A braided rug lies before the hearth, its colors indistinct now. Dark reds, browns, perhaps a faded blue. Wind finds a gap somewhere and pulls a thin sound from it, a low note that wavers and stops. The fire shifts. One of the coals splits, and a small flame travels along the new edge. The rain continues against the windows. The clock ticks. The room holds its warmth close to the hearth and lets the rest go cool. A man crosses the room from a doorway behind the bar. His boots sound against the floorboards, a slow rhythm that stops when he reaches the long wooden counter. He places both hands on its surface, palms down, fingers spread. The wood is cool under his skin, smooth in the center where arms have rested, slightly raised along the outer edge where the grain has weathered differently. His weight settles forward onto his hands. The bar runs nearly the length of the wall, its front edge rounded, its top scarred with rings from wet glasses, and deeper marks from something heavier, set down without care. He lifts one hand and runs his thumb along a gouge near the center. The wood is softer there, splintered at the edges of the cut. He moves along the bar to where a cloth lies folded. He picks it up and shakes it once. The fabric is linen, worn thin, still damp from earlier use. He lays it flat and begins to wipe the surface in long strokes, working from the left side toward the center. The cloth darkens as it picks up moisture and dust. His hand follows the same path again and again, the pressure even, the motion unhurried. The firelight reaches him here, though not the full warmth. It touches the side of his face, the shoulder nearest the hearth, the hand that moves across the wood. The rest of him remains in cooler air. He finishes one section and shifts his stance, beginning again farther down the bar. The cloth catches on a rough patch, and he pauses, working it back and forth until the surface feels smooth again under his palm. When he reaches the far end, he folds the cloth and sets it aside. He turns and walks to the hearth. The warmth meets him before he arrives, a boundary he steps through. He crouches and reaches for the iron poker leaning against the stone. The metal is cold in his hand. He fits the hook beneath one of the larger pieces of wood and lifts. The coals underneath glow brighter where air reaches them. He sets the wood down in a different position and adds 2 more pieces from the basket beside the hearth. They are split oak, dry, the bark still clinging in places. The new wood rests on the coals without catching. He stays crouched, the poker still in his hand, and watches. A thin line of smoke rises from where the bark meets the heat. The smoke thickens. A small flame appears, transparent at first, then yellow. It moves along the underside of the wood and finds another place to take hold. He stands and returns the poker to its place. His hands are smudged with ash. He brushes them together and the ash falls, some of it drifting toward the rug, some settling on his trousers. He does not wipe them further. He walks back to the bar and moves behind it. Shelves line the wall, holding bottles of dark glass, a few wooden crates, a stack of tin plates. He takes a cup from a hook and sets it on the bar. The cup is plain ceramic, thick-walled with a handle worn smooth. He reaches for a bottle on the lower shelf and pulls the cork. The sound is soft, a small release of air. He pours until the cup is half full, then pushes the cork back in and returns the bottle to its place. He lifts the cup and drinks. The liquid is cool, faintly sweet. He drinks again and sets the cup down, his fingers still curved around it. The clock ticks. The fire has caught now and burns with more light. The shadows on the walls shift slightly, withdrawing and reforming. He releases the cup and moves to the end of the bar where a wooden crate sits on the floor. He lifts it with both hands, feeling the weight of the bottles inside, and carries it to the shelves. He sets it down and begins to remove the bottles one at a time, placing them on the shelf in a row. Each bottle is the same shape, sealed with wax. His fingers leave faint prints on the glass. When the crate is empty, he folds it flat and leans it against the wall. He returns to the bar and picks up his cup. The fire cracks as a pocket of sap ignites. The rain has lessened but not stopped. It no longer strikes the windows in gusts, only runs down the glass in steady lines. He drinks the rest of what is in the cup and sets it in a basin behind the bar. He lifts a tankard from the table nearest the windows. The pewter is dull in the low light, still beaded with moisture along the rim. He carries it to the bar and sets it down beside two others already there. The sound is muted, metal touching wood. He returns to the table and runs his fingers across the surface. A ring of wetness remains where the tankard sat. He takes the cloth from his pocket and wipes the ring away, pressing down until the wood no longer feels damp. A second tankard rests near the edge of the table, tipped slightly to one side. He rights it and lifts it, feeling the weight of liquid still inside. He carries it to the bar and empties what remains into the basin. The pour is brief, the sound of it swallowed by the deeper vessel. He sets the tankard with the others. At the long center table, 3 glasses stand in a loose group. He gathers them in one hand, his fingers spread to hold all 3, and brings them to the bar. The glass is thin, fragile compared to the tankard. He sets each one down separately, listening for the faint clink as the base meets the wood. One glass has a smudge along its side. He breathes on it and wipes it with the cloth until the surface clears. He moves to the bench beneath the pegs and picks up a wooden bowl. It holds the remnants of bread, a few crumbs scattered in the bottom. He carries it behind the bar and tips the crumbs into a pail. The bowl goes onto a shelf beside others of the same size. His hand lingers on the rim, steadying it until he is certain it will not shift. A plate rests on the sideboard, a knife laid across it. He picks up the knife first, his thumb running along the handle where the wood has worn smooth. He sets it in a drawer beneath the sideboard. The plate is heavier than it looks, glazed clay with a hairline crack running from the edge toward the center. He stacks it with 2 others on the lower shelf of the sideboard, fitting them together so the edges align. He returns to the center table and wipes its surface in sections, working from one end to the other. The cloth grows wetter. He wrings it over the basin and the water drips out, dark and faintly clouded. He folds the cloth again and continues. A deeper stain near the middle does not lift. He presses harder, working the cloth in circles, but the stain remains. He moves past it. The chairs are already pushed in, but one sits unevenly. He adjusts it, his hands on the back until the legs rest flat against the floor. The wood creaks faintly under the pressure. He picks up a candlestick from the corner of the bar. Wax has dripped down its side and hardened in pale ridges. He scrapes at it with his thumbnail, and small flakes fall onto the bar. He brushes them into his palm and drops them into the pail. The candlestick goes back onto the mantel beside the other. At the sideboard, he straightens the row of pewter mugs, turning each one so the handles face the same direction. His fingers leave faint marks on the metal. He wipes them away with the edge of his sleeve. The fire burns steadier now, the new wood crackling as the flames take hold. The room is warmer than before. He walks to the windows and looks at the glass. Rain still streaks the panes, slower now, the wind no longer driving it hard against the surface. He touches the frame where a draft sometimes slips through, but the wood is snug, the air still. He returns to the bar and places both hands on its surface again. The wood has warmed slightly under the firelight. The clock ticks. The room is quiet except for the fire and the rain. He moves to a narrow cupboard beside the sideboard and opens the door. Inside, folded cloths rest in a stack. He takes the top one and shakes it out. The fabric unfolds with a soft sound, linen that has been washed many times, its weave loose and slightly uneven. He carries it to the center table and lays it down, letting it settle over the wood. The cloth does not fall evenly. One corner hangs lower than the others. He lifts it and repositions it, his hands smoothing the fabric from the center outward. His palms press flat, working out the creases. The cloth reaches just past the edges of the table on all sides. He tucks one corner where it wants to lift and smooths it again. He returns to the cupboard and takes another cloth. This one is smaller, meant for the table by the windows. He shakes it and carries it across the room. The fabric settles over the scarred wood, and he runs his hands along it, pressing down the center, then each side. A wrinkle forms near the edge. He works it out with his fingers, pulling the fabric taut until it lies flat. The third cloth goes on the smaller table near the hearth. He unfolds it and lays it down, smoothing it in the same way, his hands moving in long strokes from the middle toward the corners. The firelight catches the weave, showing the slight variations in the thread. He adjusts one side where the fabric has bunched and smooths it again. He walks behind the bar and opens a drawer. Inside, cutlery rests in sections, knives in one, forks in another, spoons in the last. He takes out 6 knives and 6 forks, holding them carefully so the metal does not clink. He carries them to the center table and sets them down on the cloth. He places the first knife to the right of where a plate will go, the blade facing inward. The fork goes to the left, its tines pointing up. He sets the second place across from the first, measuring the distance with his eye, adjusting the knife until the spacing feels even. The third and fourth places go on the long sides of the table. He moves around it, setting each knife and fork, checking the alignment, shifting them when they do not sit straight. At the table by the windows, he sets 2 places. The knives go down first, then the forks. He steps back and looks at the spacing. One fork sits too far from the edge. He moves it closer, his fingers precise, and steps back again. The small table near the hearth needs only 2 settings. He places them opposite each other, the cutlery aligned with the edge of the cloth. The knife on the right catches the firelight along its blade. He adjusts it slightly so it sits parallel to the fork. He returns to the cupboard and takes out a stack of plates. They are heavy, plain ceramic with a thin blue line around the rim. He carries 4 to the centered table and sets one at each place, centering them between the knife and fork. His hands lift and lower each plate carefully. The ceramic makes a soft sound as it touches the cloth. He brings 2 plates to the table by the windows and sets them down, checking that they align with the cutlery. The final 2 plates go on the small table near the hearth. He places them and steps back, looking at the arrangement. One plate sits slightly off-center. He adjusts it with both hands, moving it a fraction to the left. He walks around the center table again, his eyes moving over each setting. The tables are set. The cloths lie smooth. The plates rest centered. The cutlery is straight. He stands between the tables and looks at the room. The fire burns. The clock ticks. He passes through the doorway behind the bar. The kitchen is cooler than the common room, the air carrying the smell of ash and damp stone. A single candle burns on a shelf above a long workbench, its flame steady in the still air. A wooden bowl sits on the bench, wide and deep, its interior dusted with a fine layer of flour. He reaches for a cloth sack hanging from a hook on the wall and unties the cord at its neck. He tilts the sack over the bowl, and flour pours out in a pale stream. He pours until the bowl holds several handfuls, then ties the sack and returns it to the hook. He reaches for the salt crock on the shelf. He lifts the lid and pinches a small amount between his fingers, sprinkling it evenly across the surface of the flour. From another crock, he takes the yeast, dry and granular against his fingertips. He scatters it slowly, letting it fall across the flour rather than in one place, distributing it evenly. He makes a well in the center of the flour with his fist, pressing down and pushing the flour toward the sides of the bowl. The flour forms a rough ring, higher at the edges, hollow in the middle. He reaches for a pitcher on the far end of the bench and tips it. Water flows into the well, pooling at the bottom, darkening the flour where it touches. He sets the pitcher down and begins to work the flour into the water with his fingers. The flour clings to his skin, dry and powdery at first, then thickening as it absorbs the liquid. He pushes the flour from the edges of the well inward, mixing it with the water, his fingers moving in circles. The mixture becomes a paste, sticky and uneven. He adds more water from the pitcher, a small amount, and continues to mix. The dough begins to come together, still rough, pulling away from the sides of the bowl in ragged clumps. He gathers it with both hands and lifts it from the bowl, feeling its weight. It sags slightly, heavy with moisture, studded with dry pockets of flour. He sets the dough on the bench. The surface is worn smooth, darkened in places where water has soaked into the wood over years. He presses the dough flat with the heels of his hands, leaning his weight into it. The dough resists, then spreads. He folds it over itself, pressing and folding in a constant motion. Flour from the bench clings to the underside. His hands work in a rhythm, pressing down, pushing forward, folding back. The dough begins to lose its stickiness. It holds together better, though it still tears when he presses too hard. He gathers the torn edges and works them back into the mass. His palms are coated with a thin layer of dough and flour. He scrapes them against the edge of the bench and continues. The dough grows smoother under his hands. He turns it a quarter turn and presses again, the heels of his hands sinking into the soft surface, then pushing forward. The motion pulls at the muscles in his forearms. He folds the dough and turns it, presses and folds. The rhythm does not change. Small bits of dough stick to the bench. He scrapes them up with the edge of his hand and presses them back into the larger mass. The surface of the dough loses its rough texture. It becomes supple, giving under his hands but no longer tearing. He turns it again, presses, folds. His breath is steady. The candle flame flickers once and settles. The dough no longer clings to his palms when he lifts them. He gathers it into a ball, his hands cupping it from underneath, and sets it back in the bowl. The dough holds its shape, round and smooth on top, slightly flattened where it rests against the wood. He reaches for a clean cloth hanging on a peg and shakes it out. The fabric is thin, linen like the tablecloths but coarser. He drapes it over the bowl, tucking the edges down around the rim so the dough is covered. His hands press the cloth gently against the sides of the bowl. He lifts the bowl with both hands and carries it toward the doorway. In the common room, he sets it on the floor near the hearth, not close enough to catch direct heat, but within reach of the warmth. The fire crackles. The cloth over the bowl rises and falls slightly, as if breathing. He crouches before the hearth and reaches for the poker. The iron is warm now from sitting near the flames. He fits the hook beneath a piece of wood that has burned through at the center, both halves leaning against each other. He lifts one half and sets it deeper into the coals. The other half rolls slightly, and he steadies it with the poker, positioning it so the unburned side faces the heat. The coals beneath glow brighter where he has moved the wood. Small flames lick up between the pieces, transparent near the base, darkening to orange at the tips. He sets the poker down and watches. The flames grow, finding holds along the rough bark, spreading across the surface of the wood. Ash has built up along the front edge of the grate. He takes a small brass shovel from the hearthstone and slides it beneath the ash, lifting carefully. The ash is light, powdery, and some of it drifts up in the heat before settling back down. He empties the shovel into an iron pail beside the hearth. The ash falls with a soft sound, adding to what is already there. He returns the shovel to its place. He picks up 2 pieces of wood from the basket. They are smaller than the ones he added before, split thin, the grain running straight along their length. He lays them across the burning wood, one at each end, leaving space between them for air to move. The bark begins to smoke immediately. He stays crouched, his hands resting on his knees, and watches the smoke thicken and curl upward. One piece catches first, a line of flame running along its edge. The second piece takes longer. The heat builds around it, the bark darkening, curling away from the wood beneath. A flame appears, small and wavering, then spreads. The fire burns higher now. The light reaches farther into the room, touching the legs of the center table, the edge of the rug, the lower part of the clock case. Heat radiates outward in waves. He can feel it on his face and hands, a steady warmth that does not vary. He stands and steps back from the hearth. The fire needs nothing more. He looks at the flames, at the way they move over the wood, finding new places to burn as the old ones turn to coals. Sparks rise occasionally, brief points of light that fade before they reach the chimney. The bowl sits near the edge of the warmth, the cloth over it undisturbed. The tables stand with their settings arranged. The rain continues against the windows, softer now, a sound that has become part of the room. The clock ticks. He reaches for a small iron kettle hanging from a hook beside the hearth. The handle is cool enough to hold. He carries it to the bar and sets it down. From a shelf beneath, he takes a tin and opens the lid. Inside, dark tea leaves lie in a loose pile. He scoops a small amount into the kettle with his fingers, the leaves dry and slightly rough against his skin. He closes the tin and returns it to the shelf. The pitcher of water still sits on the bar. He lifts it and pours into the kettle until it is half full. The water runs over the tea leaves, darkening them. He carries the kettle back to the hearth and hangs it from the hook, adjusting the chain so the kettle sits just above the flames. The metal begins to tick softly as it heats. He takes a stool from beside the hearth and sets it a few feet back from the fire. The seat is wooden, worn smooth, the legs uneven so it rocks slightly when he sits. He leans forward, his forearms resting on his thighs, and watches the kettle. The ticking grows more frequent. Steam begins to rise from the spout, faint at first, then visible in the firelight. He stands and lifts the kettle from the hook with the edge of his sleeve protecting his hand. He carries it to the bar and sets it down. From a shelf, he takes a thick ceramic cup, wider than the one he used before, and sets it beside the kettle. He pours the tea. The liquid is dark, almost black, and the steam rises in a thin column. Bits of leaf float on the surface. He leaves the kettle on the bar and carries the cup back to the stool. He sits and holds the cup with both hands, his fingers curled around the outside. The heat presses into his palms, into the base of his fingers. He does not drink yet. He holds the cup and feels the warmth spread through his hands. The fire burns steadily. The light shifts across the floor as the flames move. He lifts the cup and blows across the surface. The steam disperses and reforms. He takes a sip. The tea is bitter, hot enough that he feels it on his tongue and the roof of his mouth. He swallows and lowers the cup, holding it again in both hands. The clock ticks. The rain has lessened further, now only a faint patter against the glass. He drinks again, a longer sip, and rests the cup on his knee. The warmth seeps through the fabric of his trousers. He sits facing the fire, the cup held steady, the heat from it spreading into his hands and wrists. The room is quiet. The flames consume the wood in their own time. He drinks the rest of the tea and sets the cup on the floor beside the stool. His hands rest on his knees, palms down. The fire has burned the new wood down to embers in places. Flames still move along the thicker pieces, but slower now, smaller. The light dims and brightens as the flames find fuel and exhaust it. The heat remains steady. It rises from the hearth and spreads outward, held close by the stone walls and the ceiling beams. The air near the fire is warm. The air beyond it is cooler but not cold. The room holds what heat the fire gives. Rain taps against the windows. The sound is steady, no longer driven by wind. Water runs down the glass in paths that do not change. The thick panes darken the world beyond them. There is only the glass, the water on it, the faint light from the fire reflected back. The man sits with his back straight, and his shoulders loose. His hands do not move. His breathing is even, quiet enough that it does not break the stillness. The firelight touches the side of his face, his jaw, the line of his throat. The rest of him is in shadow. The clock ticks. The pendulum swings behind the glass door, catching a glint of light with each pass. A coal shifts in the grate. It settles deeper into the bed of embers, and the ash around it glows briefly, then fades. The flames adjust, bending away from the disturbance, then resuming their shape. The bowl near the hearth sits covered. The cloth over it has not moved. The dough beneath rises in the warmth, pressing upward against the fabric in ways too small to see. The tables stand with their settings laid. The cloths are smooth. The plates rest centered between the knives and forks. The pewter mugs on the sideboard hold their dull gleam. The floor is clean where it was wiped, still marked where it was not. The man's hands remain on his knees. His eyes rest on the fire. The flames move over the wood, yellow and orange, edged with blue where they burn hottest. The coals underneath pulse with light, bright and dim. The rain continues. The fire burns. The clock measures a time in small, steady increments. The room is warm near the hearth and cool near the walls. The air smells of wood smoke and damp stone and tea. The man sits on the stool. The fire reflects in his eyes. His hands are still. The room surrounds him, solid and familiar. The night goes on,